Like, there's just not one size fits all for any of this stuff. As we get confused about A, what success looks like for us, and B, what we should want. Like, the blessing of it is that you can look around and see a whole load of different people doing different things and be like, oh, actually, I didn't even think that was an option. Oh, now I can see someone do it. I can kind of work out how that could be the reality for me.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen and creatives? My name is Andy. I am owner of MMG Design and your host today for the Creatives Journal. And today I have an awesome episode to share with you guys. If you are interested in branding, entrepreneurship, or anything small business marketing, you're going to want to hear all from today's guest. And her name is Liz Mosley. Liz Mosley is someone that I really looked up to for a while. She's has a significant Instagram following, and I sent her an email several months back just wanting to be on her show. She has a podcast called the Building Your Brand podcast, and Liz is just someone that has the most ultimate kind of cool mom, chill vibes, and she's someone I really look up to. Her mindset around approaching failure and dealing with rejections. She has this challenge that she sent out a while ago that really resonated with me and motivated me to start my own kind of 100 rejection challenge, something we'll talk about. And it's something that I recommend you guys all do as well, because it's so powerful. And anyway, she's someone that kind of occupies the headspace in my mind as the branding master, and she opened my eyes to the fact that branding is so much more than, visuals. Like, we all kind of think of branding, we may think of a logo, typography, visual assets, and color, but it goes so much more deeper than that, whether it's, whether or not you choose to swear in your marketing or your tone of voice. And she really opened my eyes to that, and I think she'll open your guys' eyes to some marketing and design and branding insights as well. Be sure to go follow Liz over on Instagram and check out her website, and also be sure to listen to her podcast, the Building Your Brand podcast. A lot of useful knowledge. It's a must listen for me, and a lot of good things come out of Liz's career, and she impacts a lot of people. So be sure to check her out. Everything will be linked in the show notes below. So without further ado, some of the topics in this episode are, how to deal with failure, reaching no's and rejections, Liz's career trajectory, how she settled on her services, which you'll see are a little bit niche, and I thought that was really interesting. Everything, branding and design, lessons in her career that she is grateful for, and a day in the life of Liz Mosley. Thank you guys for tuning in to entry 40 of the Creative Journal podcast. I'm so excited to share this one with you guys. And without further ado, please welcome the one and only Liz Mosley. Liz, one thing I want to ask you about is what are some recent wins that you've had lately in your career? I think that's a good way to start.
Oh, that is a good year. Well, a good question. One of the things that I really struggle with is knowing what like determines like what is recent, because I was making a list the other day of good things that I thought were recent wins, and then I thought they'd happened quite a while ago. But let me have a think. So one of the big things is I have had some dream guests on my podcast recently, so that felt like a really big win. I have done 2 virtual talks for Adobe Max, which was huge for me. I was on Chris Doe's podcast the other day. That was really recent, and that felt like a huge win for me.
If anything's a win, that's definitely a win. But I just like to start the show with good vibes like that, because I know you're super accomplished, and a lot of the audience is young creatives, and it's I know when I kind of first started, I didn't know what success kind of looks like for you, because it can look like so many things. It can be the people that are Chris Doe running their own agency, and then it transitions, or it can just be someone that is making enough, that has a happy family, and they're making enough to sustain themselves. So kind of seeing, what's out there and what it looks like for other people, I think is always a really good litmus test, just to kind of see what's possible. But I'd also like you to kind of tell your story. You have a great podcast.
and I've learned a lot of your story just from there. And I love the theme music, by the way. I find
Oh,
myself kind of like
thanks.
bobbing my head to it every time I listen to it. Yeah, so talk about your show, the podcast, and I mean, start from the beginning if you want to. I mean,
Yeah,
you're the
sure.
star here, so.
Yeah, okay. I think I was like one of those. I think this is kind of rare now, but basically, I always knew that I wanted to do something creative, like art and design, and then went to university for design and have basically worked in that ever since. And I like actually, out of all the people that I studied with, quite a lot of people have taken sort of turns in other directions or have gone down different routes, or I think everyone's careers now are a bit more varied and people move around into different things, but I feel like I've sort of stuck with it and I've kept going with the design, and I'm really glad that I have. And I really loved it. I think I started off in a little agency in London and sort of got lots of hands-on experience, learned a lot from my colleagues. I then went in-house. So I did 7 years in-house at university. Again, like working with other people was just a great opportunity to like learn from them and to, I guess, interestingly, in the in-house role, I really learned how to like manage my workload because we effectively had loads of different clients. It was a university, so we had loads of different clients within the university. And so although it was like one organization, it felt like we were working with like hundreds of clients all the time. And it kind of like really helped me, I guess, work out what my process was going to be when I did eventually go self-employed, and also like how to manage lots of different projects at the same time.
Yeah,
So I
that's
feel
what I
like,
was gonna. Sorry, not to
yeah,
cut you off. I
no,
want to say like I don't interrupt, but like I get really curious, so I ask a lot of questions.
no, that's
But
fine. Go for it.
but I'll always apologize for interrupting. How necessary do you think like that in-house experience plays? I mean, you kind of touched on it, but how important do you think that is to running like what you do now? Because I know I just went full time freelance about a month ago, and every new opportunity is like yes, yes, and I find myself getting really behind the eight ball on a lot of things, and prioritization is something that I'm definitely learning. So I was wondering, like, kind of how 7 years working in an agency like that either helped you manage your time, or do you think that was necessary? You would have been able to do it without that?
I don't think it was necessary. Like I think you can sort of go self-employed at any point in your career and you can really make it work. I think one of the big things for me has been learning how I personally, like how my brain works almost. So I think I have lots of sort of things that stop me from doing things in the most efficient way, or mean that I sort of almost like sabotage myself because I leave things to the last minute, or all these different like things I struggle with. Like a big one for me that I've had to learn is that if I don't have a deadline, it's pretty much not gonna get done. So
Right.
if anyone, basically the worst thing that any client can say to me is there's no rush, because then I'm like, oh
Right.
no, that's like terrible for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But like that's not the same for everybody else. So that's something that I've had to learn about myself, and then I've had to kind of put things in place to make myself get things done. So whether that's like an artificial deadline or having like accountability from someone else, or just outright saying to the client, don't say there's no rush, please give me a date that you expect this by. I tend to have that sort of relationship with clients where I can just sort of explain it to them.
Right.
But I definitely don't think that, I think like all that experience in the in-house and the agency role helped me a lot, and probably meant that I'd learned a bunch of lessons before I started working for myself. But I don't think it's like vital. Like I don't think that's the only way to do it. And I feel like I am still learning so much. Like I actually felt a bit behind when I started working for myself, because now so many people do it like so much
Right.
younger. And actually, I think when you're doing something I think I got a bit like complacent maybe, like I didn't have to push myself as much when I worked for someone else. And as soon as I started working for myself, it's like, okay, well, the buck ends with me now. Like if I want to make this work and I want to be able to support my family with this, like it rests down to is me. And so I think that has made me a lot more ambitious and made me push myself more, which has been interesting. Like I wasn't necessarily expecting that. But hilariously, when I was at art college, like I had no aspirations to work for myself, whereas a lot of my like fellow students, that was their goal, whereas for me it never was. But then it was having kids that then, I guess, or I started pre-kids, but then having kids was like, hang on a second, if I do this, then I can probably build the kind of life that I want, where I have the flexibility, you know, like I can go to like my kids' Christmas concert in the middle of the day on a Wednesday, and I don't have to ask anyone's permission. And actually that feels huge to me now, you know, that freedom that I have.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of this from some of the people in the creative industry. I consider role models as kids is something that acts like as a force multiplier. Like, okay, now it's not just me. It's like I have other mouths to feed, and that transition from full time to going on your own. Was there any sort of emotions? Was it a tough time? Was it difficult? Was it smoother than you expected? Because I know a lot of people start with a runway, like they'll say, I need to match my full-time income to my freelance income to my full-time income before I make the leap. And other times, like it's an unexpected change that causes you to take on these this stressful lifestyle that we have chosen. But what was that transition like for you? And is there any way that you would recommend making it smoother for yourself, or any systems you set in place that you wish you had back then?
One of the things that I did, and this was not at all strategic, really, it just worked out well, was I actually I started doing my own stuff on the side. I think because I was in-house, I was kind of like itching to do work for like other people. I started a stationery business because I like wanted to just design cards. You know, I wanted to design things that I liked just for the fun of it, not for any client. And that was kind of like a nice, I guess, like contrast to what I was doing day to day. And like those sort of things started to pick up, but I was able to do it very slowly. And then when it was sort of getting busier, I decided that I'd go down to 4 days a week at work. And amazingly, they were happy for me to do that. So then that meant that I had 1 day a week where I could really focus on my own thing. And then I went on maternity leave and had a kid. And obviously that like restricted how much I could work in some ways, but also like I didn't tend to do much client work because that was too much pressure. But like when my kid sort of had a 2.5 hour nap, I could like, pack cards and design some new things. So I could kind of fit it in around that. And I think because I'd already started, it just meant that I wasn't starting from nothing after I decided that I was going to go like freelance and not go back to my job. So I definitely didn't do the whole try and match my salary though, like that thing. And I actually, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I actually think that's such a huge ask. Like trying to match your salary in just the hours you've got around a full-time job is like so intense. I think the advice that I've heard is like try and save up, like 3 to 6 months of like income before you go self-employed, which that feels a little bit more realistic than trying to match your salary. But I mean, we like a big thing that we did was we moved city to make it more viable. So we moved somewhere where we were near family, so we had to help with childcare. I mean, there's like it's all of that stuff is really tricky and a bit of a mess because like childcare, I don't know what it's like in probably the same or in the US, but in the UK, like the cost of childcare is really high. And so if I'd gone back to my 9 to 5 job, basically all of my salary would have gone on childcare. So then it was kind of like, well, what's the point? What's the point of me? I know it was close to that. Like what I would have had left at the end was, not livable on. So we had to make some kind of like quite drastic decisions to make this, I guess, freelance lifestyle work for us.
Right.
But I mean, everyone's situations are different, and I'm glad we made those decisions. And actually, like at the time, when I was sort of picking graphic design as a career, I wasn't thinking about kids or anything like that. But actually, what's been really nice is that I have been able to turn this into something that I can do around my family. So I work from home. Most days I pick the kids up from school. Like I adjust my hours, and I probably work full-time hours because I definitely do work plenty of evenings.
Right.
But I do have that flexibility, and that's huge.
Wow, yeah, a lot to unpack there. But first of all, I thought my expenses were high, and I'm a 22-year-old male with no kids, so like my expenses are like insurance and that's pretty much it. Healthcare. I'm still on my
Yeah.
parents' healthcare, so
Yeah.
wow, I can't imagine. So, but yeah, I think it's all about kind of knowing yourself, and like I know that may sound like kind of a duck out, but it looks different for everyone as far as what's the right time. Um, and I mean, money is a different topic for everyone. Like
Yeah.
security means less to some people than it does for other people. And for some people, if they don't have the forcing function of, okay, I'm just going to take the jump and, force yourself to do it no matter the financial situation, it might never happen. And I know I stayed at my job longer than I should have because objectively, and it's only been a little over a month now, but um, my like a lot of it I realized because I think I see a lot of similarities in the people my age too, and it might be more of a generational thing, but a lot of it is associated with the thoughts that other people might have about that. So, like I was worried about like what my parents might say like when they're talking to their family, like what's Andy up to? He's like, oh yeah, he's doing his own thing. Is what they usually say. Is what they say now. And I think depends a lot on your background and what's important to you. Because my parents both grew up in very traditional roles. Father was a police chief for 35 years in the States, and in the States that's a really like respected job. It's a government job, which are very highly valued. There's a kind of a fallacy that government jobs are like really secure, and that's what you want to go for because you get great benefits, and they're very incentivized by everyone. That's like the gold standard. And mother was a teacher for 8 years, and then she had kids, and then she became a stay-at-home mom. So they're very, very traditional family. And I've always kind of been a little bit of a black sheep in that sense. But I think it's a lot about knowing yourself and then not being afraid to take the jump. And I mean, recognizing opportunities too. Were there any sort of opportunities that maybe you were excited to pursue while you were working that you're like, oh, I couldn't do this unless I was, under my own name and doing this full time to create more opportunity for yourself to be able to take those on?
I think a big one for me was a client, like my first sort of branding client. It was a shop in Peckham, and she was the sister of someone that I worked with in my 9 to 5 job, and she really wanted to work with me. It was amazing because I didn't have a portfolio to show her really, she was basically just going off her sister saying, oh, I've worked with her and she's really great. And she trusted me, and I created the branding for her shop, and it was this gorgeous shop in London. And it's still going 10 years later, and it's amazing. But that like project, well, firstly, at the time, it was the most I'd ever been paid by someone to create their branding. And I think that was a really defining project for me because it made me realize that I could do it, this could be a thing for me. And I think that was what sort of like gave me, it was almost like accidental, because I think I'd said that I was too busy, and then she was like, oh no, I really, really want to work with you. And I was like, oh, okay, fine, I'll do it. And that became such a sort of like pivotal moment for me in, I guess, my attitude changing, because I think I had thought that wasn't that wasn't something that I wanted to do. Like I didn't want to work for myself. But I think you're right. Like I think knowing yourself, like there's just not one size fits all for any of this stuff. So, like for how your career progresses, like I think one of the things that you kind of mentioned already, like you're sort of earlier on in your career, but something that you have now is that you get to witness so many people's careers on social media. And like you said, you can see what's possible. And I think that helps you work out what you want. It's almost like a curse and a blessing, right? Because seeing what everybody else is doing makes you think, oh, maybe that's what I should want. And then I
Mhm.
think sometimes we get confused about A, what success looks like for us, and B, what we should want. But then I think
Mhm.
the other, like the blessing of it is that you can look around and see a whole load of different people doing different things and be like, oh, actually, I think I didn't even think that that was an option. Oh, now I
Mhm.
can see someone do it. I can kind of work out how that could be the reality for me. And so I think,
Right.
a big part of it is A, knowing what you're like and how you want to work. And then also knowing like what it is that you want, like what does success look like for you? Because as you said at the beginning of our chat, like it is really different. Some people aspire to a massive agency, some people want a more lifestyle business where actually they earn enough that they're not having to work all the time. There's so many different ways of doing it.
Mhm.
But I think it does take a lot of trial and error and just playing around to work that out. And I think
Mhm.
that's okay. Like I feel like one of my huge values as a designer, as a business owner, is experimenting. And so just trying things but holding them lightly and being okay with the fact that I might change my mind and decide, actually I thought this is what I wanted, and now I've realized, having tried it, it's not. So I'm going to move on to the next thing, and that being an okay part of the sort of process and the journey.
Yeah, I love that. Do you know who Ali Abdaal is?
Yeah.
He's UK. Yeah. So he talks about this thing called like approaching life like as an experimenter. So trying to, whether it's trying a new career path, whether it's talking to someone new, whether it's doing all these things, um, you don't attach your emotions or your metric of success to the end outcome. You just, if you did the thing, that was success, and then the experience that you gain from it is the value that comes from it. And that's really hard to do because I think a lot of people, I know myself, was at least raised with a very black and white measure of what success was. Um, and to kind of reorient that is, you feel like you're kind of tricking yourself a little bit at first, like, oh, okay, I mean, just doing it doesn't really get you there. But once you build the habit of just putting yourself out there more and more,
Mm.
and it becomes addicting. It becomes starting a podcast, making connections with people. As someone that wasn't great at talking to people, I was like, okay, this is awesome. Like making these connections. I mean, podcast people are just super cool, and I mean, learning too. Like it's just, yeah, I love everything you just said right there. And there's a lot that I was gonna go, but that was really good. Thank you. But that also leads me to something else I wanted to talk to you about. Was it was like one of the first pieces of content that I really resonated with of yours was kind of your approach to rejection and how you've taken that to like extreme hearts. You started like a whole movement behind it. And I just want you to unpack that because I started a little experiment of my own and definitely helped me in my career. So I would, love to hear how that got started and some of the wins and maybe funny stories that have come out of it for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, it was about a year and a half ago, and I was lucky enough to go to Adobe Max, which was in LA, and I bought Christo's book at a stand. And I think I met him like really briefly, just to sort of like say hi when he was there or whatever. Anyway, I did the classic thing. I took a picture of it, posted it on my Instagram stories, tagged him, and he replied and was like, "Oh, thanks for the tag." Which I was like, "Oh, I didn't expect him to reply. That's nice." So I thought, "Oh, okay, if I reply to him now, he'll probably see it because he's in his DMs and like he's already messaged me, so it'll probably show up in his inbox." So I just thought on a whim, all right, I'm going to just invite him to be on my podcast. And I did. And he asked me how many downloads it gets. And I told him, and he was like, "Oh, sorry, I'm looking for like a bigger audience." So he said no. What was interesting to me there was the reaction that I had. So like in the moment, I felt really uncomfortable. I think I felt embarrassed. I was like, "Oh, I shouldn't have asked him." I think I felt a bit of like shame, like, oh, it just, the whole thing did not feel good. And I remember thinking, right, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to ask someone of that kind of like level of fame to be on my podcast because this
Mhm.
just doesn't feel good. And so then over the following months, I kind of started to unpack that. And I was like, hang on a minute, if that's sort of the reaction that I'm having from probably like the nicest rejection you could ever get. Like, he was so friendly and kind about it. I was like, what? How is this holding me back? Like, how is this stopping me going from things? Because I'm just having this like extreme reaction to something that's actually, in the grand scheme of things, pretty minor. And it just made me realize that I think like that a lot. And so one of the things I have learned about myself as I've run my business is that I work really well if I have a challenge, or if I turn it into a game, if I make it something fun. So a friend of mine called Katie, she's an illustrator. I had remembered reading a blog post she wrote a few years ago where she had done this like seeking out no's, like she'd intentionally gone out looking for no's. And there's lots of people doing it online. I think, like, I definitely can't take the credit for the idea. But so I thought, okay, great, I'm going to do a rejection challenge. So I set myself a challenge to get 100 rejections in 6 months. And what was so interesting to me was how my mindset on it just switched like immediately. It wasn't even like I needed to get all the rejections for my mindset to change. It was like, because I'd made the decision to do that, I'd like straight away turned it into a win-win situation for myself. So if they said yes, great. Obviously, that was what I was hoping for. But if they said no, then it just helped me get closer to my goal. And then obviously I started making content about it. People like resonated with it because, this is the other thing. It's something that everyone struggles with, but we don't talk about it because we think it looks unprofessional, or, like, what are our clients going to think if we said, we got, someone turned us down, or someone didn't want to work for us. Like, I think we've got these like very sort of outdated views of professionalism now. And so I started sharing a lot about it and connecting with different people. And one of the things that was really cool is a bit like how you said you've done your own like little challenge. Like, people started messaging me being like, oh, I'm not doing a challenge, but you, like, seeing you post about it inspired me to pitch for this thing, and it's happening. And they said yes. And, like, all these other people started doing it as well. And it's just been like a hugely positive thing for me. And it has really changed how I think about rejection. And I think having to sort of like think about it and analyze how I was feeling after each one just helped me accept it as part of the process, especially as a creative. I think it's so, it is a really scary, vulnerable thing to put your work out into the world, even to show your work to clients. I still get terrified about that. And so, like, just accepting, actually, this is just a really normal and natural part of the creative process. Everybody's experiencing it, even if they don't talk about it. And then I think I just got really excited about talking about it because I wanted everyone else to feel like, yeah, this is okay. It's okay that I got rejected. It doesn't mean I'm terrible at what I do, because that's what we do, don't we? We are like, the voice in our head starts to like fill in the gaps, and it's like, well, I haven't heard from them, so they must think they either hate me or they think I'm terrible at what I do. And we just like make up this story that's not even true. And usually it's like that the email ended up in their spam folder, or like they just had a crazy day and they saw it and then forgot to reply. Like, there's so many other stories and other reasons that it could be, but we always sort of go for the worst case scenario.
100%. Yeah, I love everything you just said, because like, I think going to that uncomfortable place, like facing the rejection, dude, I think that was really important, because, and I felt the same way too. Is like, okay, you sit in it, you face the discomfort, and you're like, this is what I was afraid of. Like, and it ends up not being that bad. It's like, if this is what's keeping me from, if this feeling right here is the bridge between my dreams, my goals, my aspirations, and where I am now, and that's the only thing in the way, it's like, it's very empowering, because it tells you that a lot more is in your control than you actually thought beforehand. And yeah, me too. Like, I feel like we have a lot in common, because I literally gamified the whole thing. I was just like, I use Notion for everything in my business. I was just like, opened a tab, 100 rejections, started just writing down like a Notion list, and put a checkbox field on each one. And I wasn't allowed to check it out until I got like a firm no. So this has been like podcast reach outs. You were definitely one of them. It's been, applying for jobs. It's been pitching myself. It's just random things, even like small things day to day, like talking to someone that I was uncomfortable, bringing something up about someone that I was, scared to bring up in person. And it's just, it's always there's that little bit of anxiety beforehand, and then you do it, and then it's gone. And I think, your content around that has helped me and a lot of other people really see that a lot more is in the control than they realized. And I think that's one of your biggest contributions to not just your content, but the world of creativity and design. And you're also just like super like relatable too. Like I can tell like even on your show that you get like nervous sometimes. I was like, oh man, me too. Like I'm the same way. But so I think that's why a lot of people like really resonate with your stuff, and you're very transparent and you have like a nice voice too. So you're able to talk about these concepts that are sometimes difficult to talk about in a way that's relatable, and it's very much appreciated. So that's why we're happy to have you on this. But yeah,
that's very kind.
So take me through, when we touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to ask you kind of about like what a day in the life looks like, and it's something I like to ask like role models and people that I have on that you kind of want to get a feeling of, because that's another thing that Ali Abdaal says too, is have your ideal calendar. Like know when you work best during the day, and like if you had a perfect day, what would that look like for you? Would you get up early? Would you choose sleep in? It probably differs from day to day, but if you had like a normal but good day in the life, what would that look like for Liz?
So what I think my dream day would be like is probably completely unrealistic, and it's definitely not what my actual day looks like, because my schedule is completely dictated by 2 small children.
Yeah.
So which is great. Like that is what I want my life to be like. But for example, I am not a morning person. Like I am awful in the morning, but I've kind of got no choice on, you know what I mean? Like I can't lie in. But one thing that my husband is very kind, and he is a morning person. So he gets up with the kids before me. So I get like, it's not loads of time, but like at least an extra sort of half an hour in bed just to kind of like mentally prepare myself for the day. Nice. But what I tend to do is, I'm sure this is a terrible habit, but what I tend to do is when I'm like have that half an hour before I have to go down and like deal with kids, I usually post whatever post I've decided for that day on Instagram. So it's normally like saved in my drafts or something, and I'll post that and just look at my phone for a bit. And then it's all about getting the kids ready for school. So we get them off to school, and then I come home and basically, just start working through my to-do list. I mean, like one of the things I love about what I do is that it is really varied, and I've kind of built it like that. Like I like doing lots of different things. So it'll be client work, podcast recordings. Sometimes I'll get to meet like a client in person. So it might be like going for a coffee with a client. It could be creating content. It could be, like meet a catch up with another creative, like all sorts of different things. And I love that. Like I love that every day is slightly different, and that there's, I can almost tailor my day depending on what mood I'm in. So like if I'm feeling really like inspired, maybe I'll just go head down like 2 hours just working on a project, no interruptions. Or if I'm not in that zone, then I'll like tick off lots of little jobs that don't like need much thought, but just need to get done.
It's like admin stuff.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the things that I really like. Obviously I still have deadlines and stuff, but I can be kind of in control of like when I do things. Then I tend to go downstairs for lunch. My husband's self-employed as well, so we kind of both work in the house, but we kind of don't speak to each other, so we'll have like a little catch up at lunch. And then basically 3 days a week I work a shorter day, so I'll stop at like 3:20 and I'll go pick the kids up from school, and then I'll hang out with them. And then the other 2 days I'll do like a longer day, and I'll work sort of like till 5:30, 6. And then it's just like all the evening family stuff, taking them places, doing dinner, all that kind of thing. And I really like I like the mix of the two. I think I probably have the potential to be a workaholic because I really enjoy what I do. And I think for me mentally, like I feel like I'm a much healthier and better person because having kids forces me to not be a workaholic. Do you know what I mean? Right. Like it's still a struggle because there's always a temptation, when you're hanging out with the kids to be like, oh, I just check my emails. Oh, I just need to reply to this person. Like sometimes I find it hard to be totally present with each thing. But on the whole, I really love the balance of it. And I love, that it makes me stop. And actually that really helps me creatively. Like so many times I'll be like off for a trip to the park with the kids or something. And then like, the creative cogs are sort of turning in the background, and then suddenly I'll have an idea and I'll quickly like jot it down in my notes to like work on later. But so I like that balance. So and then often more than I would like or care to admit, but I do often after they've gone to bed, we'll do a little bit more work in the evenings. I'm definitely like a night owl, so mornings aren't great for me. Evenings are a good time.
I'm the same way. I mean, it's about knowing yourself, right? And I love that. And from the outside, it sounds very balanced. And I mean, the concept of balance is something that is different for everybody. Like, I don't know. And I've also heard this saying too, that like balance is actually a real term, because you're actually just going back and forth trying to find what the middle actually is. But that sounds really balanced. And I mean, my sister recently, she's got a dog, and I'm not going to be that guy that says like, okay, I have a dog. It's the same thing as raising kids, but that's not what I'm going to do. But she got like this little dachshund puppy, and she's like, I can't do anything at work during the day. And a couple months go by, and she's like, okay, I'm adjusting. And I mean, I saw it firsthand. Was like, she was like so happy with the dog, so happy with work. She's like, okay, I'm starting to manage things. She's also a full-time student. So, I mean, seeing how I love the idea of something that forces you to, reprioritize and, focus on what's truly important, but also when you're away from work, you have that excitement to get back to. It kind of retains that. It's not something that you're doing in perpetuity, because I know, like I say in my situation, like I'm young. I just started doing this full time. Like, we'll worry about burnout when we get there, because I do work a lot now. And it is exciting, and it's very similar to what you said. It's a lot of it for me right now. A lot of it looks like scheduling networking events, more outward facing things, making content. And the podcast has been something that I really tried to systematize to make it. And I knew from the beginning, which I'm sure you can relate to something like this, is you want to maintain a level of quality, but also the goal is to do a podcast in perpetuity, not to do 100 episodes of the highest quality and then burn out and then not get at a level you can't maintain it. So kind of finding that balance too, where you have the passions on the side that aren't business, and they don't per se generate revenue. Hopefully one day it does, but it's that concept of balance that I think is so hard to find. And we're never really on it. So
I think everyone is sort of swinging between. I don't think anyone finds it and then that's it and they're there. Like for me, it's definitely like I feel like the other thing that I really struggle with is knowing how much work to take on or how much to take on, because I'm like a yes person. So I'll say yes to so many different things, and then things will get really crazy. And I, like, me and my husband joke all the time, because I basically spend a lot of my life saying to him, next week's going to be more chilled. And then he's like, you say that every week, Liz. So I'm like, oh yeah. So like, I think, I definitely made it sound more balanced than it actually is. And I think I will often have seasons that are really busy, and then I'll have to sort of like counteract that with a season that's like less busy, and then it starts to pick up again. So I feel like I sort of swing between the two extremes. But
that's
I think
that's like the analogy of, I've heard Rand Segal, he's at Flux Academy, said this, but he's like, it's like he's a lion, like a lion will hunt for 8 hours a day, but also sleep for 16. So kind of having those times where you're just like, okay, I'm all out, I'm grinding, I'm eating, but then acknowledging ahead of time that that's a sprint and that's short term, so that when it's over, you're like, okay, this is rest time. And it's really hard sometimes too, like when the lines get bored, when you're working at home, stuff like that. And that's definitely something I'm learning too. So, but yeah, it's nice to see that it's pretty universal. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think going back to what you're saying about the podcast, like I love chatting about podcasting as well because I've got
Yeah, me
one.
too.
But
Me too.
I think it's so interesting because it is so much work to do a podcast and you don't necessarily see the tangible returns on it for quite a long time. And I think that you're right. Like you have to find a way to do it sustainably so that you don't burn out. And I think that's why there's like some crazy statistic. I don't know if you've heard this. I think I heard Rich Webster say it, where if you get past 12 episodes, you're like in
Yeah,
the top 1% of podcasts. And I
yeah.
and that sort of that stat actually just really encourages me and gives me a boost
Mhm.
because it reminds me that actually just showing up is such a huge part of having a successful podcast. Like
Mhm.
my audio isn't always perfect. Like there's loads of things that I could improve. And yeah, I'm always aiming for really good quality content, but also just a big part of it is being consistent and showing up. And I think
Yes.
like you, I've had to find ways that I can like streamline and like we were chatting before we started recording, like you've got a really good process of communicating with your guests. And I'm guessing that you've got sort of email templates and stuff that, so you're not writing it from scratch each time. And I had to
Maybe.
do the same, like come up with a process. Here's basically like a workflow, almost like a funnel for
Mhm.
podcast guests where they're all going through it. And I think that saved me like hours of time, like having templated emails. And yeah, like you do have to find these ways, don't you, to make it sustainable, and not just podcasting, other things as well. But yeah, podcasting is a whole beast
Yeah,
on it too.
it is, and it's so alluring to start because it's like, oh yeah, it's just two people talking, microphone. It's not. There's no editing. There's no outreach. There's no anything like that. There's no thumbnail design. There's no description. There's no RSS feed. There's no all this stuff. Um, and quickly we learned that is very much not the case. But yeah, I mean, you've done obviously a great job running your show as well, and it's to the point now where it's reaching a lot of people. I mean, it's how I came into contact with you, and I mean, you start to see too that it creates opportunities outside of the personal growth that it forces upon you as well. Like for me, it forced me to come into contact with people like I have no business talking to. I feel like I mean, even for you, but I mean, it forces you to kind of become your own advocate and to believe in the value that you can bring just through a conversation. And I think that's something that is really undervalued. And as someone that listens to a lot of podcasts, it's easy to see that a lot of knowledge transfer can happen just from a conversation, and capturing those moments I think goes like a really long way. So but thank you for your show.
Oh,
And
thanks for
I'm always
listening.
happy to, yeah, absolutely. Always happy to talk podcasts. But one more granular thing I wanted to ask you about was, and I've gotten feedback on this from a lot of people, good feedback and bad feedback, usually criticism in the form of, but if you go on your website, you in particular have very granular and specific services. And this is more for the client side of things. But how did you settle on those? I know we kind of talked about the process of experimentation, finding the things that you enjoy the most. But I'm guessing in the beginning it wasn't so specified. Was it kind of a process of finding what you enjoy the most doing and what could become the most profitable? I know I reference this a lot, but there's this book by Jim Collins. Actually, it's called. Let me kind of, but it's called Good to Great by Jim Collins. And it's more like a financial literacy book, but it talks about like this thing called, and this is the thing that you always have like one good thing that you take away from a book. And that was that for me, but it's called the hedgehog concept. So you have like, if you picture like a 3-circle Venn diagram, which is like the circle thing with like the overlapping circles, not to like go back to school or anything, but one of them is like what you enjoy doing the most. Another one is what you're best in the world at. And number 3 is what you can make the most money doing. And he says to like find the thing that's in the middle of those and then build your business, your lifestyle, your schedule around finding kind of what checks those 3 boxes and finds right in the middle. So when it comes to refining your services, that's something that really stood out to me while I was, researching not just for the show, but getting to know you, was you have very refined services. And I think for a creative service provider, like a lot of the guests are, or a lot of the audiences, that's something that I'd love to hear your kind of take on. How you started on this.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, well, I think I have quite different, oh, not different. I think everyone in the industry, right, has got different opinions on this. So for example, I think you had James Barnard on your podcast, haven't you? So he has this whole story about how he put his prices on his website and all of his work dried up. So he is like, do not put your prices on your website. I used to have prices on my website. I've now made it expect to pay between. So I've made it a bit more vague, but giving people a guidance.
Right. It's
and
like level of engagement. Yeah, engaging.
Yeah. And I think for me, like, I haven't had a problem with getting clients with them on my website. I know this isn't the question you asked, but it's kind of all linked to the services. But I just find this really interesting how everyone's kind of got a different take on it. Because like for me, I think it hasn't had an issue in terms of getting clients, and it also filters out people from the start. So I think probably what made me do it was I was having a bunch of conversations with small business owners who were like, oh, it's too expensive for us. And so I was like, which is totally fine. But now most of the people who I have inquiry calls with like already have a good idea of the price. And so then I think it makes it easier. I think I'm the sort of person who I'm like, I almost like feel, and this is like a mindset issue that I've had to work through. I almost feel guilty for like charging people. Do you know what I mean? And like, I don't feel that so much now, but it's something that I've had to really work through. And so I think putting the prices on my website actually like helped me work through that. And also then like helps clients know whether I'm the right fit for them. In terms of the packages, I think it was more just sort of refining my workflow. And then like it was having worked with a whole bunch of clients and refining my workflow and thinking, okay, these are the things, this is how I tend to work. These are the things I usually make for them. And then, like with everything, there's always flexibility. So I kind of put like a list of here's what you're going to get in this package as a guideline. But then I'll often chat to a client and they'll be like, well, actually, we don't need, X, Y, Z, but we do really need this. And I'm like, totally fine. Like you can have like a bespoke package. So I think it's more just there as like a guideline. But I work mostly with small businesses who don't have massive budgets, and actually hiring a designer is kind of a big deal for them. And so I like to sort of explain what they get in the package as much as possible. There's definitely loads I could improve. Like one of the things that I'm working on at the moment is like a video that explains my process that would go up there as well. And, like more like written text that actually sort of describes what they can expect when they work for me. So I think it's just again, it's experimenting. Like I've put up a certain amount of information and now I'm thinking, right, how can I improve this? What more information would be helpful for them to have before we start? Is there a certain information that actually is going to overwhelm them? And so it's better to have that chat in, when we speak on a call, and that doesn't go on the website. So I think it's just trying things out, and again experimenting, which is what James did. Like he experimented and he tried putting his prices on the website and it didn't work well for him, and so then he was very happy that wasn't the route for him to go down. But then like I feel like there's a few topics like this where designers are really like very passionate about what they think. So it's like the prices on the website, it's the how many logo options, how many all of those sort of things. And I always feel a little bit like I'm doing different
like I'm neutral,
everybody else is doing.
Exactly. And I was and I asked because like it is one of those things. I totally agree. And like we're just trying to get as much inputs here as possible so that you can kind of tailor it to yourself, because it is, and I've said this like 20 times today, but it's like it's different for everybody. And the answer is usually it depends. I know for myself, and it depends on like what kind of services, what your skill set is. I think you found a way to kind of like productize your services a little bit so you can easily explain to them. But I would always say, like, I would rather just talk to you about it. So let's get on the phone, and then, because it is a tailored solution to everyone. But yeah, there is a very strong draw, especially when you're young and getting started, to be like, I can do anything you want, like graphic design, business cards, websites, e-commerce, anything, like, I'm your guy. So yeah, that's kind of where that question came from. But I do agree 100%. There is people that, put a flag in the ground, like 3 services. One of my mentors, Josh Hall, he says you have like an in the door service. So like a build a relationship service, a nurture service, and then a grow service. So
nice.
There's always kind of meeting someone at each phase of how they might of interacting with you. Like, there's always something that they can choose from. And I think this is all very, for me at least, and there's another reason why I asked, it's very abstract because it looks so different for everybody. And I mean, it is a very trial and error situation too. And another risk that can come along with saying that you can do everything and then just throwing everything in the kitchen sink on your website is that people don't know what to come to you for. So if you say you do websites, you do brand identities, you do traditional graphic design, all this stuff, UI, UX, animation, there's a million different ways you can go. And that's something I really respected about you, is that you've managed to stay rooted in more traditional work. I mean, even your entire brand is, about building brands. So if I think, okay, I'm a startup, I'm needing a brand identity, like, you're very close to the top of mind in terms of association to, what you market yourself for. So you've done a very good job of that.
Oh, thanks. I realized I didn't answer your question because I didn't say how it narrowed down.
I mean, I didn't even realize it either, but
I think, to answer your original question, I went off on a tangent about pricing and stuff, but I think,
I didn't even notice.
There are loads of other things that I could offer, and I think it is exactly like you said. I hate this word, but niche, or I think you guys say niched, don't you? I niched down
you can say either, I know. It's a debate over here. We're American babies, so.
But yeah, I guess I just decided, actually, for a whole bunch of different reasons, like branding for small businesses was the thing that I loved. And, occasionally someone will get in touch with me and be like, oh, Liz, do you do this? And I'm like, well, yeah, I can do that. And if it's something that I'm interested in, I'll say yes. And if it's something that I'm not, I basically have a whole bunch of people now that I refer people to. So like, quite an example is I build websites on Squarespace. I'm not really interested in doing them on other platforms. I know I could learn if I wanted to, but I'm quite content with what I'm doing. But if anyone comes to me asking for a Shopify website, I've got a friend who I know does that, and I just I just refer them to her, and actually that works really well for me. Yeah.
And that's a great concept too, because it's, as I get out of the shell of mine and start to go to these networking events and meet like-minded people, it's like no one does the exact same thing as you. They may say it in their whatever 20-word LinkedIn subheader, and that's how you got in touch, but everyone is different, and everyone has a different unique contribution that they bring to the world of creativity. And as a service provider, is kind of recognizing that and having a system for recalling upon them, and also staying in touch too. Like, that's so hard. And I'm in a situation too where I've kind of popped around in different places. Like, I lived in one area of Ohio, I moved to North Carolina for school. I moved to Northern Ohio to finish school, and then now I'm back in a different area of Ohio for job. And now I'm in a different area for freelance. So it's like maintaining relationships and kind of being able to stay top of mind is, it's a big key to, especially when you're like a sole proprietor, business owner, keeping relationships and being able to stay top of mind, just not just for sake of your business, but just for sake of, keeping relationships and friendships is important. It's hard too. So I think that's something that we can go through a little bit, but thank you for answering that. I think it's always unique and interesting to see different perspectives on, creative business, especially when money is involved and, marketing yourself. There's a lot of emotions that can get, in the water too. So it's really interesting to hear, your perspective as anyone that's been in business for a long time. Obviously, I think we're open to hearing their opinion and their guests. So I really appreciate it. But I don't want to keep you too much longer because I know you have like a very busy life, and your time is very valued here. But I wanted to close with like some rapid fire design questions and maybe just some more laid back type of stuff. So your favorite Adobe program?
InDesign.
InDesign, really? I was expecting Illustrator. No way,
I know,
really?
everyone, it's like my closet secret.
Really?
No, I think it's
so
because
yeah.
InDesign is what I started on, like, and so for a long time InDesign was what I was more comfortable with. Now I spend more time in Illustrator for sure, but I think it's still my first love.
Yeah, that's what I've heard people say, that is that they started in InDesign for like doing traditional print, and then it's like every time they get back into it, there's like, oh my gosh, I miss this so much.
I love it. I know I do love it. Yeah.
I hate it. It's so like, it's so many icons, and it's I don't know. We were having a good chat, and then you just had to throw that.
Sorry, ruined it.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Your all-time favorite project that you've done?
Oh.
I know it's kind of a bomb.
I've just finished a branding project that might be my all-time favorite, and it was for a live illustrator. So she goes to events and illustrates as people are talking. So I did her branding, but because it was quite collaborative, because obviously she's an illustrator, so she like contributed some illustrative bits to it, and I love how it turned out. I'm sure after this I'm going to think of another project that I love. I mean, I love my clients. Like, I get to work on so many different things.
It's that recency bias, but yeah, that sounds like a really cool one. I went to a wedding for my buddy recently. I can't even think about it. My friends are getting married, but he had one of those at his wedding, and it just blew my mind. I was like, and she was just there all night in the corner. So like, I just had a little like shadow liner, like some in a movie, just painting away, and it's like the bridesmaids, the groomsmen, and then the bride and groom kissing in front of the altar thing. I was just like trained. I probably spent like 30 minutes over there just behind her shoulder. I was like, wow, look at you go. But
it is amazing.
They're incredible.
Such a talent.
Yeah.
Such a talent. Yeah.
I know. It was so amazing. Yeah. That's a really cool project. So yeah, kudos there. Sorry. If you had to do a project for a dream client, but they had to be a fictional character, who would they be, and what project would you do for them?
Like an existing fictional character.
Yeah.
Like, as in, okay. Oh, that's a great question. Okay, hang on. You might have to cut out a pause while I think about it.
No, dude, take your time. I've got all morning. I know these are like weighty I call them rapid fire questions, but there's a lot of weight here, especially if you want to give a good answer.
Okay, I've got it.
Let's hear it.
It would be like something from Jane Austen. So like period drama, like some sort of like song sheet or booklet, like the sort of thing that like really old fashioned, like beautiful type, like letterpressed, like all the bells and whistles for this like beautiful booklet that they would all like hand out at some event. That is so random.
No, that's not random.
It comes back to like my love of InDesign is like print is my first love. Like there's just something so magical about designing for print. And I actually did this letterpress course in this amazing venue in London, and I just loved it. And I just think there's something so amazing about that style, just like all the classic stuff. And it's not really what my style is now, because my personal style is more like hand-drawn, playful, like colorful, but I just always am drawn back to that sort of like the traditional design kind of aesthetic. I think
I think that's important to kind of retain that too. Like I know I first got into creativity through journaling and like through bullet journaling, and I mean I've always still done it. Like I'll do a little blurb every day, but like I'll look back at my past journals and I was like, man, like, and I'll get like really inspired. It's like, I want to do that again. But it also kind of makes me wonder too, is like, man, how much free time did I have to go in and do all this when I was little? But it's interesting how like your priorities change. And I think keeping I think it's a big part of being self-aware too, is knowing what was important to you and why you started, and retaining that, genuine curiosity. So, I mean, that's why I like to ask that question. I've gotten a lot of different answers, but it really kind of puts you in a different mindset. Like if I was in control of, what I did and exactly who I did it for, what would it look like? Even if they weren't real, which is why it kind of is funny sometimes. And it's always funny answers, especially when there's a cultural like difference. Like I didn't even know what James said. I had no idea who that character was or anything. It was like, but yeah, I've gotten a lot of answers like movie characters and like Steve Austin, just like some stuff on movie sets, different branding projects.
That's cool. Oh, there's just so many things.
Posters.
Yeah.
Right, I know. And it's like, you're probably like, after you're done filming, you probably think of like 20 other things. You're like, oh, that would be a cool one too.
I absolutely am. I'll be like messaging you later being like, okay, this is what it actually would be.
No, put this in the show notes after this answer.
Yeah.
But and I haven't found out what the answer would be for me too. So I don't know, it's just a cool little,
I love it.
Cool little thought exercise, That's a good way to end off the show. But like I said, Liz, I really look up to you. I know that a lot of audience does as well. And ever since, going full time on freelance, I very much understand the value of time, and I really feel like yours was valued today, and we're so glad to have you sharing your relatability, your transparency, and everything. We really look up to you, so thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for what you're doing, because I feel so inspired by the content you're creating and how encouraging you are. And I mean, I can't believe that you've only gone freelance a month ago. I feel like you're smashing it.
Well, I mean, I give that impression, but yeah, no, super appreciate it, and we'd love to have you on for round 2 sometime. But where can people go to learn more about you, your business? Listen to all. We'll link the Christo episodes and stuff below. We'll link your website and socials. But yeah, where can people go to learn more about the awesome Liz?
Oh, thanks. LizMosley.net is my website. And then I spend most of my time on Instagram, and my handle is @LizMMosley. There's a lot of M's in there. But yeah, that's mainly it. And then my podcast is called Building Your Brand, and you can just search that wherever you listen to podcasts, or if you go to LizMosley.net/podcast, then you can find it there as well.
Yeah, I love that. We both have .nets too.
Oh, do you? I know. I always feel a bit weird having a .net, but some artist in America has got LizMosley.com. So.
And yeah, same.
Rude.
That's very unfortunate, but
yeah.
But yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Liz. Seriously, and you're killing it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. All right.
Amazing. Thank you.